Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the Only Women Entrepreneurs podcast, fondly known as O. I'm your host, Rosemary Cescolini, former high school English teacher turned successful businesswoman simply by pursuing an alternative career at Royal Door Limited, a family-owned and operated company since 1975. There, I personally designed and manufactured wood interior and exterior doors for over 3 decades, which are featured everywhere. So if you're looking at home renovation and construction magazines, you'll find Royal Door on home improvement shows such as Home and Garden Television. We have worked with top-notch designers such as Brian Gluckstein and TV personalities Brian Baumler and Mike Holmes. I had the pleasure of connecting with our next guest, Rachel Bourne, at Born to Drill via a post she made on Instagram. I had congratulated her on becoming the vice president of the National Drilling Association's Ontario's drilling chapter. In her post, one particular comment stood out for me, and I thought Rachel would be a great guest to address a serious issue in the drilling industry. But before we get into that, we would like to formally welcome and say hello to Rachel Bourne.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I think the best way to start the interview is to give the O community some information about yourself. Like, who is Rachel Bourne and what do you presently do for a living?
So right now, I'm the general manager of Elements Geo Corp. It's a drilling company located in Hamilton, Ontario. My background, though, is I'm a geotechnical and environmental driller. So I went to school at Fleming College. I graduated with a diploma in drilling. And then ever since I started off as a laborer, like an assistant driller, and then I've worked my way up now to management.
That's amazing. Congratulations on your moving up the ladder.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So going back to your employer, what services do they provide for their clients? Because I think your line of work is something unfamiliar to our audience, and I think we need to have a little bit of background information to better understand the interview.
Yeah, of course. So geotech and environmental drilling happens pretty much before any stage of construction. So whether it's a farm field that's being looking to be sold, an old gas station that they want to do environmental monitoring on, say your backyard, you want to do an extension and you want to put up a 3-story building in the backyard, stuff like that. So the geotech aspect is we go in and we find competent soils and ground conditions to know how deep you have to build your foundation on, if there's any fill from a previous owner, and then just so that you know what your spec should be for when doing construction. The same thing goes for the massive towers that are going up in Toronto. Any of those, before anybody does any sort of construction, we're out there and we take samples to know what the soil looks like. And the engineers then have an idea of how far they need to set their casings and everything else for the towers, and the buildings. And then on the environmental aspect side, we install monitoring wells so that we can test and we can review the water samples for long periods of time to know if it's contaminated, what the water levels, how they fluctuate during the different seasons, and then also just contamination. So a lot of areas have been contaminated over the years when there wasn't proper practices with disposal and making sure that your tanks underground didn't leak, stuff like that, even removal of tanks. So we go in and we kind of do different analyses of the ground and see, okay, this area is highly impacted. They may need to go back and do remediation. Or no, this section is clean and they can sell it, because remediation is very expensive. I'm sure, as a lot of people know. So we kind of just go through the impacted zones. We do monitoring wells, and then there are some people that actually do they do the remediation part, but our company hasn't stepped into that yet, but it is something that is needed. So we call it kind of phase 1 and phase 2 of projects before anything else happens.
Right. Right. And it sounds like really important work you do, that any construction projects, before the shovels hit the ground, you need to know what the ground is all about. And for our listeners that may not know, there's a lot of different types of soils out there. Do you care to explain like the difference between, say, topsoil and sandy loam, and something that like shale or even clay? What are the types of soil that perhaps would prohibit excavation, and how would you go about in remedying that?
So because we are first step, obviously, like, we need to know what we're getting into, what kind of soil we're dealing with. And even when we're dealing with certain types of soil, like wet sands, and we call them flowing wet sands, because as soon as you hit it, it's pressurized, usually underneath like a solid layer of like a mixture of dense clay with sand and cobbles and boulders and gravel. And that creates a layer that's compressed. So as soon as you poke a hole in that, the water just wants to escape and come up. So we deal with our own issues with stabilization of our own holes. But then imagine building a building on 30 feet of just wet Play-Doh, right? You don't want to do that. So
well, you'd have a collapse of the structure, basically.
exactly. So we like, our whole basis of what we're doing is just the finding. So trying to find competent bedrock or competent ground, depending on what the engineer specs they're looking for, will depend on the height of the building and everything else. They kind of just give us that information, and then it's our job to go out and find that competent ground and tell them, like, these are the types of soils that we're hitting. So we do this by sampling with just like a 2-inch spoon is what we call it. And we just hammer that into the ground. Okay. And it's per 6 inches. We'll kind of tell you, we call them 50 blow counts. So how many times it's hit repetitively into a 2-inch or 2-foot spoon. And that kind of gives some information. So usually we'll go from 0 to bottom of the hole all the way down with spooning. And then we also take core samples. So if we do end up hitting bedrock, then we will drill with a diamond bit, and that will spins very quickly. We use water, and then we're able to retrieve full core samples. Yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Oh, cool.
There's soil samples where you can pour. Yeah, it's incredible. And the technology is just growing. There's now sonic, where they use it's very, very small vibrations, and it's able to actually push into the ground pretty quickly, and you can actually see water inside of your samples completely closed off. It's the technology nowadays is insane. So but Ontario is just filled with different types of geology. Welland and Niagara is
I'm aware of that. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up.
And Hamilton is, you're hitting like shale and limestone, depending on the area. Sometimes really, really shallow. Sometimes, if you're down by the lake, like 90 to 100 feet. Toronto is the same. Toronto, you can be drilling for 200, 300 feet before hitting bedrock. Yeah, so it's incredible. Depending on where you go, you have to be so knowledgeable and have so many different types of tooling and abilities to be able to kind of go from one area to the next, because we're all over the place all the time. So you have to be able to work with it.
Oh, that was a fascinating description. It was really interesting. Yeah. So now I just want to focus on the environmental side of it. Sure. So gas stations are always some are decommissioned because you're going to have high rises being built over the site, or some of them, after so many years, because of environmental concerns, they shut them down, and they dig up the tanks, and then they have to service the whole site. So what exactly do you look for when you're dealing with something that's environmentally sensitive, like a gas station?
So most of the time you're trying to delineate where the impact has created. So sometimes you're starting from where they know the tank started. And then with time, with water, again, that moves around a lot of soils and the actual contamination within. So you could have a gas spill that was just very, very small, like a water bottle size, that over time has just spread and leaked through other passages of water, through the surface water that's gone down into through the topsoil, sands, or whatever type of material you're dealing with. It really depends on the soil. So a lot of the time we poke 3 to 4 holes in that area. Usually when you're looking for environmental, you don't want to combine water tables. So sometimes there's different areas where you have a water table around 30 feet, and then you have another water table, say 60, 70 feet. So if you cross those water tables together, you can actually pass through the contaminations from one water table to the next.
Oh, wow, that'd be
and
disastrous.
A lot of people rely on these water tables for drinking water wells still. Like that's a totally different aspect of drilling that I'm not involved with. But
but that would be a health hazard, right?
Yeah, but I know a ton of guys that are still involved in water well drilling. So yeah, that's another thing that you kind of have to think about when you're a driller, making sure that you're not impacting. So we clean our tooling, we clean our samples with soap and water. We make sure that there is no cross-contamination, and then trying to get the best soil sample for the engineer so that they can take that back to their labs and fully study it to understand what sections are the problematic areas. And we may have to go back and re-drill to find different areas if they have found impacted zones.
This information is completely blowing my mind. It's just amazing what you just described. And for you to have all that responsibility on your shoulders, and I'm thinking in my head, like, why would you pursue a career in drilling? Like, what led you to go that route?
To be honest, I didn't really know anything about it. I had always thought that I was going to pursue fashion and art. That was always like my love and what I wanted to do since I was a child. And then in high school, I just started realizing I didn't take any extra math credits or science credits or anything like that. I'd only taken art-based credits. And I got to a point where I'm like, where am I going with this? My parents were like, you should go to university and you could get a 4-year degree with your art. And I'm like, where am I going to move? Mulan? Like, to pursue fashion, I'm going to be sitting like sewing other people's designs for probably years to come. I might lose it as a hobby. So I just decided, you know what, I can keep that as a side hobby. I will still love it 20, 30 years down the road. And now I can start a career where I can actually make money right away. So I heard about it. Exactly. And I was like, I wanted to move out of my parents' house before I was even 18. I was like, I need to get going.
But you needed this, right? You need some money.
Exactly. So my parents did set a fund away from me for paying off some of my university. But when they told me the amount that they'd saved, I was like, that's not going to pay for 4 years of university. Like, that's absolutely not. So
what's the cost now? Because I've been out of university for quite a while. Well, what are you looking at these days?
Man, when I was looking, I think it was like 4,000 to 5,000 a semester at least for 4 years. So
roughly 8,000 to 10,000 per year. Times 4. So you can be in the hole between $32,000 and $40,000.
Yeah, at least. And then again, art supplies and all this stuff that you probably have to bring yourself. Course. Like, my mind was like blowing up. I was working at Home Hardware and I was like, I cannot afford to.
You can't do it, right?
University. Absolutely not. And my parents were like, you can stay home and live with us. And I'm like, no. I'm getting out.
You wanted your freedom.
Yeah, I wanted to leave. So I heard about the drilling and blasting program when I was in high school in grade 11. It was my fashion class. So it was a mixed credit. It was mixed with college and university-based kids. So they said there's this college fair that you're going to attend. And I'm like, I'm not going to college. Like, it doesn't matter. I don't need to go. Right. And they brought me anyway. So I went in, I sat down and I was listening and I was kind of rolling my eyes like, I'm not going to college. I'm going to university. And then this woman came up from Fleming College and she was giving her spiel about what the college offers. And then she said, there's this really cool program called drilling and blasting. You can make up to $80,000 a year. 90% employment rate right after graduating.
Wow.
And it's a really cool program. You should check it out. We're the
And
only person that
you're
offers it.
sold. That's me. That's
And
me,
I'm
right?
like, what? And I told all the girls in my fashion class, I'm like, I'm going to go do that. And they're like, what are you talking about? You're not going to go do that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm going to try it. So I went home. I told my parents that night. My parents were like, what? Like, this is totally different than what you had told us before that you were planning on doing your entire
Oh,
life, Rachel.
wow.
Like, relax, think about it. And it was stuck in my head. So I took my parents to Fleming and the Lindsay campus, Frost campus, and I just loved it. It was very small. Like, my parents had taken me to universities just to make sure that I was making the right decision.
And it
I
was a
loved
credible
it.
program, probably. They wanted to
Yes,
make sure, right?
it's the only program really offered
I never
in
heard of it.
everywhere. Yeah.
How many students did they take? Do you know in the program?
When I was there, I think there was about 120 students. The blasting program was about 50 students, so it's a certificate program. It's only 1 year, and then they offered a continuation into the summer. And I
Right.
got to skip first semester because I took the blasting. I got to go into the drilling, so I took second semester in summer, and then I graduated the next year
Mm-hmm.
in the, I guess, the spring semester. So I
Okay.
did 5 semesters of school in 2 years, and I graduated with a certificate and diploma
Fantastic.
with no debt.
Well, no debt and a
No school
job
debt.
probably waiting for you, and you were ready to go make
I
money.
had a I had three
That's
job offers when I left.
fantastic.
3 different jobs that I could have gone to, and those were just the ones that I applied to that I was interested in.
Hmm.
There were more than 15 to 20 employers at the job fair for drilling companies.
That's wonderful to see you're
Yeah,
in such high demand, and then you had, a little bit of selection. You didn't have just one offer.
exactly. I got to choose where I wanted to go, which was
Hmm.
really nice. And it was actually really hard because there was a lot of really great companies that offered different things. It was just about where I wanted to be, location wise, because
Yeah.
you can go and travel the world with drilling if you want to. Like, there's companies that come from the States, from Australia, from all over.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up because having a skilled trade, it's an exportable resource.
Yes.
So if I don't want to live in North America and I want to go to Europe, or if I want to go to South America,
Yep.
the skills appear. It's all
Hmm.
knowledge, right?
Hmm.
You can
Yeah.
put
Yeah.
you can pick where you want to live and how you want to live your life. So
Yeah.
that's great. You can work as many hours as you want or
Yeah.
as little as you want.
Yeah.
So much freedom. That's incredible. I want to circle back to your definition. You said that you got a certificate in blasting.
Sure.
Again, we're dealing with terms that are probably new for our community. Would you
Yeah.
mind explaining what blasting is?
So I did blasting, which is where you learn how to load holes that are usually done in quarries, for the collection of gravel,
Hmm.
um, like big pieces of rock for maybe your garden, different things like that, materials that are used for sand and concrete and all these different things. So usually out in quarries and mines. They also have blast hole drillers. So there are drills out there that just drill straight into the rock, a
Hmm.
certain size hole. And then we learned how to fill those holes with explosives and
I
different
thought that.
slurries.
Well,
Yeah.
that's so awesome.
And yeah, it was incredible. And learning to it's really interesting because the blasting is not just stick dynamite in the hole and run. There's different patterns to get different ways that the rock can be blasted so that you get big chunks or like little granular sizes. And these people and these men, mostly men, I didn't really meet any women, but mostly men have been doing these for years, and they've created their own patterns, and there's like they have their own kind of science behind it that is just, it needs to be taught through and passed down from generation to generation. It's not really something that
Right.
you can kind of just get yourself into and figure it out.
Hmm.
One other really interesting thing that I always thought about was there's no specific safe distance to stand back from a blast hole.
Okay.
So if you live near a quarry, they always have the alarms that sound so that people in the area know what's happening before they set off a blast.
I bet.
Um, and then when we were out there as students, we were like, how far do we stand back? And they just say, as far as you can. Like that was pretty much it. So that was
Wow.
one interesting thing. But yeah, we
Well,
got to the quarries and we
yep.
got to see the demonstrations and work with other people that were actually in the industry, and be taught by them and our teacher who had previous experience as well. So it was very hands-on, very interesting.
It's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's totally new. Like you, when going through your educational experience, think back at high school, was there any time in your years there that someone came in and talked to you about these opportunities? Like, I'm pretty sure you would have had half the class raise their hands and say, hey, that's maybe a career that I find fascinating because, A, you're outdoors.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and to be honest, not really, because I grew up in a very like white collar neighborhood and
Mm-hmm.
area.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in like Brooklyn, Ontario. My parents are both, my mom's a teacher actually, and my father
Kudos.
and my father works, he's a businessman, he works for IBM. So they both went to university. That was never really something. And I don't have any other people in my family that I know of that are in any sort of trade. So I didn't really have that person to look up to, which I know a lot of
Wow.
people, and even listening from your podcast, you've had people that, oh, I saw my dad do this, or I saw my grandfather do this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Somebody in your family that you've seen do that. I just, the only thing that I had was home hardware, where I saw all the men coming in all the time.
Important. One of our major customers, and I'm thankful that they employed you, right? So we
Yeah,
come from
yeah.
opposite worlds, like because your parents were white collar workers, right? And naturally, they want to push you towards that university education. Whereas my parents came to Canada in the late 50s, and they
Mhm.
didn't speak English, and they only had an elementary school education. So the only thing they could do is apply themselves to some sort of blue collar job, which was unskilled until
Right.
they learned the language and they're able to learn and have opportunities. And as they were able to progress, they themselves started to go up on the social ladder. And that's the thing they told me every day when they came home from work, how hard their job was, how hard it was, not being able to communicate. And hence they said, you know what, you need to go to university because the quote unquote, the abuse that we are enduring, we don't
Mhm.
want you to endure. So go get yourself educated and make sure that you have a nice paying a job. And that way you don't have to worry. But mind
Right.
you, because they were doing these jobs that nobody else wanted to do, they were well compensated
Yeah.
and we had a secure life. And
Yeah.
that allowed me to carry on the next generation. They provided the building blocks. So it's so important to let women know that skilled trades have incredible opportunities. Like you mentioned, you graduate, you have a job waiting.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about in terms of pay. So I'm assuming that you'd have financial security. What are like the pay ranges roughly from someone starting out, someone in the middle of the career, and someone maybe like yourself that's a general manager?
So it really depends on, I guess, which industry you go into and where you're located.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll just speak for Ontario.
Sure.
And with my, like, I guess even GTA, because even if you go past GTA, then it's different depending on where you go.
Right.
So with geotech environmental, you usually start around 40 to 50,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
maybe more, maybe a little bit less. But that can sometimes be without any knowledge. So you don't need to go to school to have any ability to get into this trade. It's not technically considered a skilled trade,
Okay.
which is surprising. And I'm trying to
That
do
is
something.
because that's a tremendous amount of responsibility. So if I'm sitting in a classroom and I'm in grade 12, I don't know what I'm going to do, and I reach out to a company like yours and say, hey, can you hire me? I have no experience. So you're saying that's the pay range that I might be getting?
Yeah, like I would say, like most companies I know with no experience are between, I can't remember. I know we do everything hourly, but for our company specifically, we're hiring you between $24 an
Okay,
hour
that's fair.
to $28 an hour,
As
depending.
opposed to minimum wage, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
You're already ahead of the curve.
Exactly, exactly. And then if you do have your schooling, but you're starting out,
Hmm.
or you have your DZ, or which is like your driving, your extra driving for the
Yep.
bigger trucks, or your AZ, we then hire at a rate of, and I feel like this is most companies, between 28 to about 32, 33. And
Fantastic.
then after that, pretty much sky's the limit. Like if
Wow.
you go
Wow.
to a specific company and you show that you have all these credentials and you have good, you have the knowledge of drilling and your experience, like you will be paid for it. So, and again, like we're always busy. So
Okay.
if you're not out
That's
drilling, you're
believable.
in the shop cleaning, you're fixing equipment, because a lot of our guys, like we don't have an in-house mechanic. We have somebody that does a lot of the mechanic work.
Hmm.
But everybody kind of chips in and they help and they fix their own machines. They learn how to do that. Like I had to fix my own machine when I was out on site with minimum tools, like and no
Wow.
experience. I was just
So
I
no
had
one
to.
taught you how to service your own machines. You basically it would break down or needed some sort of service, and it was kind of like
You have to figure
experimentation.
it out. Yeah, you got to figure it out. You're stuck on site. You have an engineer staring at you, waiting for you to finish up. They don't want to stay there till 7 o'clock at night. I don't want to be there till 7 o'clock at
Oh,
night. But
wow.
because our jobs are sometimes daily jobs in
Hmm.
different like sites,
Hmm.
if your job goes into the next day, you could screw up the entire schedule for the week or even the month. So making sure that you're done your job for that day so that you're ready for the next job the next day, like you have to be ready for that. So there was a lot of times that I was in the middle of a farmer's field and my equipment got one of my fuses went, right? And I had to jump the fuse and just keep going. And
Hmm.
there's been times that I get stuff stuck in the ground and I have to figure out how I'm pulling this out without breaking anything or hurting myself. And yeah, it can be really tough. Whereas a lot of other people, it's like, oh, you just call someone, you break down, that's fine. I'm only working 40 hours this week. It's like a lot of the times I was working 12-hour days, 5 days a week. So I pushed myself a lot to try
Hmm.
to learn as much as I could and
Of
push
course.
myself up to a position where I would be secure. And that way they saw that and they appreciated that, because they're like, she'll put in the time, she'll put in the work. She doesn't care about staying late. Like she'll be there to do that job. And that's kind of how the drilling industry is right now
Hmm.
for the geotech environmental. They expect you to work those long hours and to make it work, so that the rest of the schedule will kind of make sense. But
Well, the company has obligations to their clients, right? And they have to keep the schedule
exactly.
going. So that's quite understandable. That's a day-to-day business. Now, if I don't know, someone that wants to change career, they maybe wait in their 30s, they're not liking the career that they're in,
Mhm.
and they want to go to college and perhaps get the certificates that you received. Is Fleming College the only one that's available in Ontario, or are there other ones like George Brown College or Humber College? Do you know?
No, Fleming College is the
It would be
only
the only one.
location. Yeah. In the States, they do offer training on site,
Hmm.
where they will give you an actual drilling license, but you have to
Okay.
put in the hours. Here in Ontario, you just get a well license to be able to install monitoring wells.
Okay.
Uh, and then, yeah.
So if the program is limited in spaces and I don't get in this year and I decide to go work somewhere, get some experience, and then I still don't get in because there's a waiting list. If I were to get my credentials somewhere else outside of maybe Canada or outside of the province, and then I wanted to come back, would they allow me to still work and receive the pay that I am entitled to because I went to get all of my certifications?
It depends on the company. Some companies don't care if you
Mm,
have any education or not.
okay, it's good to know.
Some companies, like they'll Some companies think that you come from another drilling company
Hmm.
and you have zero knowledge because there's not a specific standard
Yeah,
set.
I
Whereas
figured.
like other trades have that. They have like the journeyman, the
Sure.
master electrician, everything. Like it goes up in levels.
Hmm.
Whereas we just have our drillers assistants, our drillers in trainings, and then our drillers. And at that point, the management kind of decides, okay, you're ready to go off and start drilling, or you're ready to move up to a driller in training. You should go on this job, or you should go on this job to learn a little bit more about it, because there's so many different types of drilling that we specifically do just as geotech environmental, that it can take years and years to have the knowledge to even start operating a machine, because some
Hmm.
companies don't let you operate a machine until you've been working there for 2 to 3 years. Whereas I started operating a machine at the age of 21, and I was only in the trade for
That's
a
young.
year and a half. Yeah. So
Oh, it's so young. And you
it,
know
it
what? I can understand that from an employer's perspective. Like when you have machines that cost millions of dollars and you have someone that has absolutely no experience, and all of a sudden they don't know how to program it or run it properly, and you have a machine breakdown,
yeah, yeah. Or
that's
even
disastrous. Or even
injuries.
more serious,
Crazy. Yeah,
injuries, because then, okay, let's deal with the injuries. Then you get the Ministry of Labor come in, you're shut down
yeah, yeah.
and you're investigated, and it's just a horrible situation to be in. And also with machines breaking down, we have such a shortage of technicians to come in to service the machines. You might have to wait months to get an appointment and months to get that part once they figure that out. So a machine could be down like 6 months to a year.
Yeah, yeah, and we deal with that every day. Like we have things breaking
Yeah.
down. There's no suppliers really in Canada at all, so everything is coming from the
Wow.
States. And we don't
That's
have,
wow.
nobody in Ontario knows how to fix a machine,
Yeah.
like a
And
drill.
I concur. We have the same issue too.
So,
When our machines break down, we have to get technicians that fly in from Europe.
wow, wow,
They,
that's
they're
insane.
they're not here, and that's why we're doing this podcast. It's so critical
Yeah,
because our society is not going to be able to function. Things are going to break down on a regular basis because A, they're not being maintained.
yeah,
B, we're not getting new things built.
right.
Sure, we can get things built in other countries, but once they arrive here, wear and tear, they have to be serviced. And
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to do that much longer. It's pretty scary right now.
And even materials are getting they're less
Scarcity.
quality for
Ah,
more expense. So
right.
that's another thing we find. Things are just constantly breaking
Hmm.
down because
Hmm.
they're using cheaper materials so that
Yep.
they don't have to put that expense in. And it affects us. They don't care. We know that they know that we have to buy it off of them in order to get our machines up and running,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
it's insane.
Yeah, we go to Europe once a year, and we go visit the tooling companies, and we bring the specs to these factories, and we have them made there to our specifications. Mind
Oh,
you, it takes time. It
hmm,
could take like a year to 18 months, but
hmm.
once you've developed the whole system, because the first time you go, they have to do all the tooling for it. But once the tooling's set up, you know that this part only has a certain amount of lifespan. You can order extra parts, and that's
Oh,
what we
okay.
do. So we'll have like a whole array of parts, and machine goes down. Okay, fine. We get someone in the shop. They take apart the machine. They see what part needs to be replaced, and they can do it on the spot. So we only get like an hour or 2 hour downtime. So
Right.
that's one thing that has helped us with this critical part that we are experiencing all through the industries at the moment.
Yeah, of course. Well, there's some manufacturers that have, because our rigs are kind of just a bunch of things put together
Yeah.
from different companies all over. And something that the industry in general is dealing with right now is the fact that they have remote controls, which is great, so
Hmm.
that we're not sitting on the machines and moving them around if there's a risk of tipping. So we use a remote control. They don't have any more parts for those controls. They're sold out. So we can't even purchase a new control. We have no way to buy parts for that control.
That's
So
frustrating.
we're just stuck. We're left with it.
Yeah.
So we have a machine that doesn't move because we don't have the parts to fix it. So we've actually had to create our own remote systems and having to try to just make it work with all of our experience kind of combined to just deal with it for now.
Unbelievable. That's really unbelievable.
It's crazy. Yeah. So
yeah, it sounds like you don't have a typical work day. That was my next question. So what's a typical work day for Rachel? Like, pick any day of the week. How does it start all the way through? What are your duties?
All right. So I guess right now as general manager, it was a little bit easier when I was out drilling because I would go to the shop 6 a.m., load up the truck, drive to site, work on site all day, usually 8 to 9 hours, drive back to the shop, unload, go home. Now, as the general manager, I'm in the shop usually I've started coming in a little bit later, but I'm usually
one of the perks, right?
6 to 6:30 in the morning still. I make sure all the guys know what they're doing, get them out the door. Thankfully, I have help with another manager that's there. But yeah, we get everybody out the door. We make sure that they're on time. I make sure that they know where they're going, make sure they have all their stuff. Like I'm kind of in charge of that, making sure that they know what's happening. Because again, people get switched around. I'm dealing with people calling in sick, people being late, all those different things that you deal with
day-to-day administrative issues. Yeah, I hear you.
So once they're all out, that kind of gives me some time. So sometimes I focus on the social media of the company. Sometimes I focus on any previous emails from the night before. I print off all the billing from the guys because they have to do day-to-day billing to give me information so that when I invoice the clients, I know exactly my breakdown. So sometimes that's clipping multiple days together and then leaving it to the side so that I can process it once the job's complete. Sometimes it's putting it right on the desk so that I can complete it and invoice it that day. So I kind of go through that. If there's any estimates from the night before, I do those. And then clients start calling around 8 to 8:30 in the morning. So then it's usually 6:30 to 7:30. I have about 7:30 to 8 o'clock to kind of figure myself out. And then I'm making sure that the guys are out on site on time. They know where they're supposed to be. They get set up. And then around 9 o'clock is when I start dealing with people calling like, hey, I forgot this, or hey, this isn't working. What should I do? Hey, like we're running 3 to 4 crews right now. So all those calls come into me. And then
so how many people do you manage?
There's 10.
There's 10. And are they all male?
All male.
Wow. So how do they interact with a female supervisor or boss? How's that going for you?
Thankfully, I'm one of the first people that worked there. So the other manager, me and him actually came from a different company, and we started at this company kind of together again.
Okay.
So he was managing, and he was actually a manager that had pushed me up to drilling at our previous company. So that's why he'd always had my back. He was like kind of like an older brother to me. He pushed me forward in a way that didn't give me any problems. And he would always offer solutions. So that was really nice. So then when we moved here, I started off as drilling, and then I went to the drilling trainer, and then I went to health and safety, and now I'm managing. So we pretty much like work side by side, but when we got really busy, he's been going out drilling. So a lot of those times I kind of lose him as that support system, and I've kind of had to just figure it all out by myself. But because I've hired all of these men that work for us now, they've always just kind of seen me as a boss. So I started at this company when I was 23. I'm 26 now. So
young. That's incredible. I love that.
So the guys, sometimes when they're newer, they're like, oh, she's like, oh, I have to deal with her. Because I'm pretty straightforward, and I'll tell them, like, I don't want to deal with this. Move on. Like, and I don't.
So you set them straight. Like, we're here to do a job.
Exactly. Sometimes I feel like I'm their therapist, if they're having women problems, whatever, on the side, I'll talk about it with them because I want to make sure that they're
You want to have a good
comfortable, they're
relationship too,
happy.
right? Yes.
Of course. And
Makes sense.
I think it's really hard trying to, especially with guys that are older than me, because most of them are older, except for maybe three of them. So all of the guys, like, they've been managed by lots of different people in the past, but not usually females. So I want to make sure I have a good relationship with them, but I also want to make sure that I'm not being taken advantage of. But none of them have shown that. I feel like I'm 6'1", I stand my ground. I'm a
You're
pretty
very,
big
yeah.
girl. But no, they know that I can do the job.
Mm.
So I think that's really what surpasses me compared to maybe being the boss's daughter or somebody else, that I just kind of worked
Great
my
point
way
you
in.
brought up.
And some people are
Yeah.
like, oh, like she just got given this position. No,
Yeah.
I worked my butt off for this position. So,
Well,
um,
because you know what, you have the experience, right? And you have the knowledge and you're proven.
mhm,
So there's really no reason why you should get any backlash from your male employees, right? You're
yeah,
it's something that I think a lot of women um, are afraid to enter male dominated industries like construction and manufacturing because there might have been some past experiences where they did hire women in the past and perhaps they weren't up to par with the position and they kind of like just fell through and then they kind of like had a general opinion of all women, which is not necessarily true. Each person, whether it's male or female, you got to judge them on their own merit. You can't assume that Rachel's on the job, that Rachel's incompetent, that Rachel's not able to do what she needs to do to help the company keep their clients and get new ones, right?
yeah. No, I've been in that position too, where even when I was an assistant, people were saying, one of the guys said to me, I've hired 5 women and I've fired 4 of them. What makes you different? I'm like, I'm not answering this question.
Oh,
Thank you very
you
much.
told them right off.
Yeah. Thank you very much. See you later. I don't care what you've dealt with. I'm not that same person. And that's fine. And again, like, I know people that work for that company and good for them, but
But I'm glad
I,
you brought that up because that
yeah,
was that was a situation that any woman is going to face. And you, very confident in your skills, were able to say, listen, there's lots of opportunities out there. I don't need this job. Plus, I don't want to work for someone that's like you. And you got up and you
exactly.
left, right? So
Exactly.
that's good that you brought that up because it in emboldens women to have that courage to say, you know what, I know I'm good. And if
Mhm.
this is not the fit for me, I'm going to go somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's out
Great.
there because again, this industry is still so like, and I know more and more people are getting to HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and that's great, and carpentry and
Mm-hmm.
bricklaying, and like there's women promoting that. I only know maybe 5 females in drilling right now across Canada. Like, I do not know of that many, and whether or not they're running a rig or just an assistant at the time, I'm not sure, but I know that there's a short, small amount of women actually doing this. So when I've gone out and I've gone to interviews and different, um, even just like meetings with other drilling companies, people are kind of like, I don't know if she actually knows what she's talking about, and I can just sense that through conversation
Yeah.
and issues that I have with these people where I'm trying to have a discussion with them, and they're kind of just like, whatever. But that has to do with my age, the fact that I'm a female, and the fact that they don't really know who I am, which is fine. And they'll figure it out. The drilling industry is very, very small. So most company owners now know who I am, um,
Mm.
either for good things or bad things. I'm assuming hoping good things. I try to encourage like a community of drillers to come together. That's why I started my Instagram page, was just to try to encourage. First, it was females to join, but now it's just anybody in general. I want to
Anybody.
encourage men and women to join because our industry is just going to collapse.
And that would be horrific.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't
So
imagine.
and that's the thing. There's different things. Whereas like you see the construction, they're providing bathrooms for women on site. we don't even have bathrooms on site. I go in a bush. Like that's my bathroom on site. The guys have a bucket in the truck. That's where they go on site. Like that's our industry. It's very different from what they're promoting with actual like skilled trades, the
Mm-hmm.
HVAC, plumbing, and all that, which and even like factory work, I know it's gotten a lot better with having women's bathrooms and not just a male only bathroom. Like I know that I've been in some different scenarios where I have had to go and drill inside, and they're like, here's the bathroom key for you. And I'm like, this is so awesome. I don't have to drive to a gas station today. So those opportunities, yeah, they need to start coming forward, but it's difficult with our industry because we're out there day to day. We're in different spots all the time. So it's just trying to figure out how we can encourage more women to want to join, but they have to understand that they're going to deal with stuff like that. And most of the time it's you and one other person out on site. So like I was harassed by one specific man who I had to just keep going out with, and it was just me and him on site. Wow. All the time. So those are issues that also need to be resolved, and hopefully by talking about it as a community, we can try to figure out how to stop that from happening.
So you already started the discussion that I wanted to start talking to you about, like circling back to our introduction of how we met on Instagram. There was one specific comment that you made that really caught my attention because it aligns so closely with O's mission statements. And that is addressing, like we said, the severe skilled labor shortages in male-dominated industries. The comment that you said was, since graduation from the drilling program at Fleming, I have worked with tons of people with different backgrounds and experience. More of my fellow graduates have now left the industry only 6 years later. And so why is this happening, and what can we do to attract and retain women, and maybe in this case also men in the drilling industry, so it doesn't completely collapse? Because if you guys are not there, then you know what, construction is not happening. And you know, we have a housing shortage, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing, like we're pre-construction, we're before any new roads are being developed, critical. Old roads, like bridges, everything. So
I can go on with a list of infrastructure, right?
Exactly.
If you're looking at the other day, they finally took out the boring machine that got stuck in Toronto. It was in the ground for a year and a half. Yeah. Because it got ensnarled in some metal and cables from a condo that had been built previously.
Yeah. Tiebacks, probably.
but the work couldn't go on because that machinery had broken down and they weren't able to get it. And then they had other technical issues. But I think it's not only technical issues, it's like you said earlier, is we don't have the technicians.
Yeah, no. Exactly.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to let you comment on, and so why did the graduates leave?
So when I graduated, like I started, there was about 120 guys in the program. There's 4 women. 3 women graduated. That's and a lot. I think 50 finished the course. Okay. So that's just their own situations. They're not enjoying it. They couldn't understand. The math was pretty difficult. It's hard to kind of picture drilling a hole on paper. So we have the outside drills that they actually let us like drill on, but it takes a kind of a bit of time for you to understand what's happening down a hole when you can't see it. So not a lot of people stayed, but then most of them, I think, found jobs after. And just from talking with some of my buddies and everything like that, there's a lot went into construction drilling, that's actually unionized, but you're a laborer. You go into local 183, I think it is. You're a laborer, and then you're kind of just tossed around. So if they don't have work for you, you're sitting at home. So then they're jumping from company to company. And then because you're a laborer, they don't just keep you on the drilling side. They'll send you to do whatever they need done on that job site. So a lot of the guys kind of just found probably easier, chiller jobs to just go and do instead of being an assistant for construction. And then geotech and environmental drilling. So my field, it's kind of difficult because, again, like I always say, we're kind of living in the 80s. It's very push, 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 go, 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 get the job done. We don't care how
Hmm.
long you stay out, just finish it off. There's not a lot of support. There's not a lot of understanding. A lot of the times it's older men saying, I did this for 20 years. You can do it too. Not my problem. Um, and it just pushes the younger guys out. They're like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with the
Yeah.
hours, with the manipulation, and there was a lack of pay at the time too. Like the
Mm.
people weren't getting paid very well. You had to suck up to the companies in order to make your way up. Like guys just didn't want to do that. They didn't want to deal with that. So a lot of people left. Also with geotech and also the mining industry. So the people that do the collections of the samples for
Hmm.
gold and other minerals, exploration, they're traveling for weeks and weeks at a time, sometimes months at a time. So I had buddies that were up in Nunavut and they were helicoptered out and left there for a couple days because the helicopter couldn't get back in because
Oh,
of
wow.
snow and everything else. So
Pretty
these
scary.
guys, and they're on camps. So they're on camps, dry camps sometimes. So they're dealing with all of this where they're out all the time away from home. They come back for a week or two and then they're back out there. And there's still a huge amount of substance abuse and other things, whereas a lot of those people are going out there to make a ton of money, which is the
Hmm.
same with oil and gas. A lot of them get hooked up in other things. So because
Oh,
they
there's
have
isolation, right? And
isolation and they have to pass a piss test a lot of the times. So they're just taking the drugs that will stay in your system for the least amount of time, which
mm,
are usually the more intense substances. So
that's not
that
good.
created a huge issue with the industry as well, because those guys are like, I want to go make money and I want to go travel and I'll go and do this. And they do it for a small amount of time. They're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, this is not what I expected. And then they
That's
come
hard. It's a
back.
hard life.
Yeah, and then they come back and they're like, I'll just try something else. And it'll be the same everywhere I go because the industry doesn't have those stepping stones, I guess. They
Hmm.
just assume that if I go from one company to another, it's going to be the same. So I think like the NDA, the National Drilling Association, I'm really hoping that that can get a lot of the employers have been coming together and discussing like what's happening, and they're even seeing it that like most of these companies have been running for 20 plus years and they're like, okay, we need to do something about this because it's not changing. Everybody's very secretive. Nobody wants to talk. Nobody wants to have discussions about what's happening. So
Hmm.
um, I think just creating like that community and then obviously providing that community to drillers as well, showing like
Hmm.
these are the people that you can talk to if you have an issue.
Okay.
Um, these are the situations that if you need help or if you need guidance, like you can talk to this person, or if you have mental health issues, like these are the people that you should reach out to, because when you're working with all men, most of these guys have a lot of like mental health issues that are just going unsolved and undiscussed. Like
Yeah.
they don't want to bring it up. They don't want to talk about it. And
Yeah.
that's why I feel like I'm a therapist sometimes, because I want to talk to these guys and make sure like, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? How's
Mm.
everything at home? Like, do you need anything? Like you're not eating, I haven't seen you drink any water today. Like stuff like that. I want to make sure
Yeah,
like
these are
you
serious concerns. You're right. They need to be addressed because if they're not addressed, like you said, you might have people that'll come in because they're attracted by the money. But if they're going through some, mental stress, they're not
Mhm.
going to be able to cope. And I think this is perhaps a suggestion is being an entrepreneur myself and going through a lot of phases. Um, you got to have that mental toughness because if you don't, then being an entrepreneur, you're just going to quit. And one of the hardest times that we experienced was during the pandemic, and when you rely on a staff to produce product, and then all of a sudden they opt to stay home because government checks were coming, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you still had the responsibility. We were fortunate to stay open, and we were extremely busy because we had no outside competition, which was fantastic. So
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
it was all hands on deck, and we were working very long hours, and it exhausted us for two
Yeah,
straight
totally.
years. So I can really understand that. But what kept us going was mental toughness. And that's one thing that I am actually gearing up to do is provide um, mindset courses to
Mm,
assist people in these situations where they might be going through, like you said, some personal issues at home, or it could
right.
even be professional, and they don't
Yeah.
really have
Yeah.
anybody to talk to. And then you set someone up with a coach, and they have that one-to-one time. Like, you don't have to go specifically to a person's office. They just have a conversation on the computer, and
Yeah.
and we discuss, and we do things together so that we work out what is really ailing you, and that gets you to the point where when you hit a brick wall, you're not gonna you'll fall for sure, but you're able to get back up and then say, hey, you know what, it's just another little obstacle. There's a solution. I'll get
Mhm.
through it. So I think that's one thing that perhaps you can consider being the VP, bringing someone like myself on board to
Yeah.
to create some strategies so
Yeah.
that you guys have some tools, to develop tools that you can use, each company. But then if there's something out there that some of your workers might need more, then like bringing me on, then perhaps having some like group sessions to help them, because it sounds like it's going to, I think, it's going to get worse, because as you have an
Yeah.
aging population,
Yeah.
those are the tough birds. Okay. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking of my dad and
Yeah.
my father-in-law. They, oh my God, they were tough as nails. Like, I don't
Yeah.
even have a tenth of their strength and toughness.
Yeah.
But once they're gone and we have a softer generation, they're not going to last without these tools. It's so important.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the guys, if you were to bring forward this idea right now, they'd be like, I don't need that. But it's like you put them in a situation in a room
Mhm.
where it's like, I don't care whether you want this or not. Here you go. And you
Well,
kind of just
everybody's like that, right?
put it to their face. Yeah,
Yeah.
then at that point, I think it would be very helpful, and people would take something,
Sure.
even if it's one or two things, they take
Hmm.
something back with them. And I think just having that discussion is important
Yeah,
because
no, that would be great. Like
yeah.
reach out to me and let me know, and I'd be more than happy to help out, and hopefully we can come up with a solution. And that's why we're here, right? We're
Mhm.
having this discussion because if I didn't have you on the show today, I would not have known this. But yet I understand how important your industry is. And
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and it actually, it's frightening to know that it is at such a very fragile position, and it's something that we need to address like today.
Yeah, and I hope to do that with more trainings and bringing people together just to have conversations to discuss it further because yeah, at some point, like you said, it's not going to be here anymore and then the I don't know what the next steps are. I don't even know if they're thinking that far ahead.
Hmm.
So, but hopefully we can change something.
I hope so. I hope so. I would look forward to a collaboration. So, what advice would you give to women who are listening, who are hesitant to step into these male dominated industries due to this existing gap? Like, why should
Um,
they take the plunge?
I think just because no matter what, like you can always do it. There's nothing really holding you back. Whether it's you're afraid of somebody's going to treat you disrespectfully, it still happens in the corporate world.
Hmm.
Whether it's happening out on site or if it's in an office space, it's still happening. Women are still dealing with those gender issues every single day. And even people that
Of
are
course.
now non-binary or trans or however they identify, they're going to be dealing with issues no matter where they go. So I feel like a lot of places with construction, there's actually more freedom and you have that ability to kind of express yourself. Like I can go to work wearing makeup or I can go to work just out of bed and haven't showered for 3 days. Like, I can look however I want, and nobody's really judging me for my appearance, what I'm wearing. I come to work, I do my professional items that I need to do. I do my tasks. I make the client happy, and that's my job. I'm not there to impress anybody. I'm not there to suck up to anybody. I'm there to do a job, a task. I want to do it well, and then I get to go home. And like, that's what I really enjoy about it. So I think women thinking about, oh, I don't know if I could do that, or I might not be strong enough to do that. Like, either way, like, the industries are all changing. They're trying to adapt. They're trying to allow for women to kind of step into these positions. And then I find with just being a woman, I've been able to work my way up a lot faster because I have I don't want to say maturity, but I have the different aspects from my life that I've seen through being the student president council, like from doing different volunteer work, right? I've been able to kind of take all these things. I want to learn from other people around me. So I've been able to move myself up. It's not always about, I'm going to be a bricklayer for the rest of my life. Like, you could be a bricklayer somewhere and then you could start your own company, right? You build the clients,
Absolutely.
you do what you need to do, you get in touch with the suppliers. Like, there's so many more opportunities than people think of, like, oh, I'm just going to be a plumber and that's it. Like, no, you have to think way bigger than that. And that's why I like the fact that you're an entrepreneur. You've started this podcast for women in trades, because it's not just about go work for someone else and be under their spectrum or their bubble. Like, go out and make something for yourself and change the industry. And I feel like as more women do that, and even as more men do that with the same ideas as women, with the respect and bringing that up and ensuring that everybody feels comfortable on site, like, you'll have those opportunities. So
that's great. Well said. So, Rachel, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show. We had a really powerful discussion today. I'm a very big fan of supporting women in all stages of life looking to pursue a career in male-dominated industries. So can you tell our O community where they can find you if they have any questions pertaining to geotechnical and environmental drilling?
Sure. So you can contact me on my Born to Drill on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok. And I don't use TikTok as much, but I'm more of an Instagram person. But I also use LinkedIn a lot. So it's just Rachel Bourne. And then reaching out to Fleming College, the staff there, specifically the teachers that I had, who are still the teachers and professors there. They're a great resource to just reach out to if you're interested. And
hook us up.
That work at Fleming College, they're great, and they'll put you in the right direction.
That's great. I would like to take the opportunity, also thank all our supporters, and I hope we presented some valuable insights in the career opportunities available in the drilling industry. Please share the episode with others so that they can learn more and about some important takeaways from it. And don't forget to hit subscribe so that you don't miss out on the next show when it drops. I would appreciate some love on social media, so please leave us with some feedback. You can find us at Only Women Entrepreneurs. If you're thinking about entering an alternative career or starting a business in manufacturing or construction and need some help, just reach out to me on my website, onlywomenentrepreneurs.com, for a free consultation. I would be more than happy to provide you with some guidance. Thank you, everyone, and I look forward to our next episode.